This is Retire Hour.
Welcome into Retire Hour, the weekly show that helps you stay up to date on the ever-changing landscape that is retirement. I'm your host, Matt Goolsby. We appreciate you joining us this week. However you get your Retire Hour, whether it's on Cox Cable 22, Sunday nights at 9 o'clock, whether it's on the radio over the weekend, or whether it's on the podcast, or better yet, we're building a neat resource for y'all, retirementhelp.com. Go check that out. Facebook page as well, retirementhelp.com, and or the YouTube page, retirementhelp.com. Lots of resources there for you on a weekly basis, because this thing, retirement's not a set it and forget it. And speaking of not set it and forget it, your estate plan, that's really not a set it and forget it. I'll be sharing a story here at the beginning of the show about someone that had the proper estate plan in place to help when their family was caught by surprise and tragedy struck. Then we'll have Danny Goolsby and Jonathan McCoy here as well. After the bottom half of the hour, we'll have Taylor Bevan. Her and I are going to be talking about IRMAA. I was at a real estate class this last week that we taught. IRMAA is something that catches a lot of people off guard because of the delayed effect. You won't want to miss Taylor and I talking about that here later in the show. Of course, Gerald Eidelman and I will be talking about a story that I saw on the news, and he mentioned to me as well. This blended family, they have an inheritance that just kind of blew up, and it cost the beneficiaries, the family, a lot of money. You won't want to miss Gerald and I talking about that later in the show. And then Joshua's got the week off, so we got Lauren Dietz with Market Tax Services. She'll be talking about why you want to look at tax planning in July, and some important things you want to make note, because we're already halfway through the year, if you can believe that. But back to sometimes when tragedy strikes and you just aren't prepared, or maybe you could be prepared. In this case, to the fortunate, to happy ending, they were prepared because they had worked with us and had this relationship with us for a while, working as this team, the financial advisors, the estate planning attorneys, the healthcare advisors, and the tax advisors, all working together. But I shared this story in our estate planning class about Faith and Tom. Faith and Tom, they had one daughter, and they had about $1 million to their name. Faith and Tom did. And I think Danny was actually their financial advisor in the real life, Faith and Tom. And Danny had met with them during a review, and Faith and Tom had some concerns on, well, what happens if we leave this $1 million to our daughter? Can she lose that in a divorce? Can her husband divorce her? And can she lose part of the inheritance? My father, being a financial advisor, he's not an attorney. He's not equipped to really answer those questions, because compliance will tell us all the time as advisors, if you're not licensed to give that advice, don't give that advice. So in the real life story, Danny walked down the hall and grabbed an estate planning attorney. Gerald was one of them that he grabbed. And Gerald had this conversation with mom and dad, and to make sure the inheritance could be protected as much as possible, mom and dad leaving that legacy to their daughter. Let's going to call her Cindy. So Cindy, she inherits, if she were to inherit this money, they wanted to make sure that legacy that Faith and Tom had sacrificed their whole life was going to be at least somehow protected from either being spent all at once, or maybe their son-in-law encouraging their daughter to spend money on frivolous things, maybe a Ferrari, I'm being a little extreme here, or maybe a lake house, or maybe just, unfortunately, we've seen it go to the casino. The average inheritance does not last very long between taxes and what Gerald will deem creative spenders. But back to how this all was trying to be avoided, they worked with the estate planning attorney, they worked with the advisor all together as a team, and they crafted a trust. And this trust, when mom and dad would pass away, or when that day would come, the trust would hold the money for the daughter. And that way, the money staying inside the trust, it could buy her a house, it could buy her a car, but the trust would own the house, the trust would own the car, and it would never pass to the daughter, again, Cindy's, hands. And that way, that money would be protected from, again, creative spenders, or being potentially counted as an asset in the marital estate if he decided to divorce their daughter. Well, as it would have it, you plan for all the what ifs. You want to make sure you have those all covered. And sometimes it's the scenario you thought coming. And sometimes it's an unexpected ending, or a plot twist, if you will. See, in real life, the father has passed away, Tom has passed away, Faith is still alive, but the daughter passed away first. So now, what would happen? Well, as Gerald wrote the trust, and the trust would say, is when Faith passes away, the money still goes to the trust, and the grandkids of the family can still benefit from that money. But this would have been this probably would have been Faith's last thought from her mind of how this would have all played out. But we never really know how the last days of our lives will play out. And if you don't have a plan, or if you don't know if your plan is the right one for you, or maybe even better said yet, if you've not had your plan reviewed in the past 5 years, the attorneys at Eidelman Law Firm, they encourage you to make sure you're kind of checking in and making sure as things change in life, as sometimes the rules change. Because when the Secure Act was passed, there was some tweaks they've had to make to some trusts because of how IRAs have to be all paid out within 10 years of your passing. There's so many things that can change here. There's so many things that can be in flux. And if you don't know if you have the right plan for you, just reach out and give us a call and schedule a 15-minute chat with us at 833-MAG-REPORT. That phone number again is 833, the letters M-A-G for Market Advisory Group Report. Or you can go over to the website at marketadvisorygroup.com. And coming soon, again, like I mentioned earlier on the show, retirementhelp.com. That's a great resource there we're working to build out, and just got launched, just soft launched a little bit, but we've got a lot more resources coming your way, on-demand classes, and of course, the blogs that are written there and all the other resources. Well, stay tuned. We'll be right back with Danny Goolsby talking about, should you project to live to 100? We'll be right back. Welcome back into Retire Hour, the weekly show that helps you stay up to date on the ever-changing landscape of retirement. You know, we're financial advisors here in the first half of the show, and then we bring in the CPAs and the estate planning attorneys and the Medicare advisors to give you an all-rounded point of view for your retirement education. And we're going to go out to the West office here, and Danny's coming from the West Wichita office, and you're going to talk to us about we should plan to live to 100.
We say in our workshops around the metro and Kansas City metro all the time to people that there is something that unites us as a culture. We all pretty much feel this way, that people are more afraid of outliving their money than they are of dying. And so I read a study earlier this week or last week that said Americans' longevity illiteracy puts retirement at risk. And this is a study that was put out by the American College of Financial Services, which is one of those think tanks that we often will look to on different topics. And so I'm just going to read a little bit of this and then stop and talk with Matt. Matt, you and I have talked about this kind of thing a lot in our career together. So this article starts off by saying that the number of Americans living to 100 is projected to quadruple by mid-century, but the financial planning required to support such long lives is lagging dangerously behind, according to new joint research from Nationwide and the American College. Dubbed the Century Club study, a nod to data from U.S. Census Bureau projecting that the number of Americans that are turning 100 or centenarians are going to go from 100,000 currently to over in 2024 to roughly almost 500,000 by the year 2054. The initiative reveals that a longer life can sharply escalate the risk of outliving retirement savings, which goes back to that risk that we are all alike. We're all afraid of outliving our money or having, more life than money. And let's stop and talk about that for a moment. If I'm someone who, man, if I'm 65 and I retire and I pass away at 75, if I have, an average nest egg, if you will, am I really going to have a problem? And the answer is usually no. I'm not going to have a problem if I retire at 65 and pass away at 75. I'm probably not going to have any kind of lifestyle problem. On the other hand, if I retired at 65 and live to 90 or even 100, as the studies talks about, and run out of money at 75 or 80, what does that do to my quality of lifestyle?
Well, and this is a conversation where my brain's going. We'll have some conversations on this line of thinking when we're talking about Social Security timing. And when the guys over at Market Tax Services, they run those Social Security reports with the RSSA, the Registered Social Security Analyst reports, they'll talk about, what's your parents' longevity, and they'll talk about what's your health. And we start having that conversation. And a lot of people will still kind of in that 80s range. They're going to kind of live till 80, 85, somewhere in that range, sometimes older. But when you start having these conversations, it kind of sets in with people of, oh, I've got another 20 years in front of me. I've got to make this, what I have, last.
Well, and there you go. So too many people underestimate how long they're going to live. And that blind spot can seriously undermine their financial security. I mean, there are too many things that we've seen just since COVID that we've seen the cost of goods and services go up enormously. So in other words, inflation's continuing to go up. Great news on the horizon. The cost of eggs has come down, and I'm joking a little bit about that. But again, the how do you adjust for that mid plan where, oh, I'm living longer than I thought I was going to. And so if you're not dealing with someone or a group of people that can help you, whether it's Social Security or other sources of income that can help you, say, you may run out of money, but you'll never run out of income. And that sounds like a little funny axiom there, but it's the truth. There are strategies that we employ all the time with people that no matter how long you live, yeah, your pot of money may go down, but your income streams will continue for the rest of your life. That can bring a lot of peace of mind to people. And so those are things that we try to have conversations with our clients about.
Well, and it gets back to sitting down and creating a plan, because if you're not thinking that you need this plan and you're living, day to day, it's not really probably a great quality of life, wouldn't you think?
Well, and that's just it. This study, it kind of finished up saying that the Century Club survey suggests that learning about longer lifespans prompts many people to change behavior, which is kind of what we're talking about here. 67% of respondents said that they would increase savings after they started to realize how long that they may live. 58% would adopt a healthier lifestyle, and 63% of those would take steps to reduce debt. This survey went further and said that reducing debt for the older generation, if you will, is something that is becoming increasingly more difficult to shake off. As Americans find that they have more debt than they do necessary in life. So again, it goes down to conversations, and are you dealing with a team of people, whether that be your healthcare cost, whether that be when to take Social Security, whether that be your income streams, when to take them. We're not just talking about financial performance on your investments. Those are all great, and those are all necessities to have. But it's important about the whole picture and bringing that picture together.
Well, and I hate to go 4 years in the future, but this president might not have to fix Social Security, but Social Security is going to run out of money in 2031, 2033, depends on several things there. But if you're not planning ahead for that, because taxes are probably going to change there, probably there's going to have to be some changes to Medicare in there as well, because they're connected. And if you're not even thinking about how it is today versus how it could be in the future, you're only going to be inviting surprise and chaos, correct?
Exactly so. And so, again, it's important to be nimble, and it's important to be on the cutting edge of these conversations as they unfold in front of us.
And that's why we meet together as a team, not just the advisors, but the tax advisors, the estate planning attorneys, and the healthcare advisors, and now the RSSAs that help us run those Social Security reports. And if you guys are thinking out to yourself out there, man, do I have a plan? Am I really ready to retire? Because, you don't control what's going to happen with the economy when you retire. Do I hope the economy will go up over time? Yes. Do I think we have some volatile times in our future here in the short term? Maybe even 24 months out? Possibly. I hope they get tax reform passed, and I'm going to expect they do, but then I'm going to make sure my clients are maximizing those tax changes for their situation by bringing in those tax advisors. And if you don't have a tax team helping you navigate these potential tax changes, reach out and schedule a 15-minute chat with us at 833-MAG-REPORT. That phone number again is 833, the letters MAG for Market Advisory Group Report. That's our retirement estate planning, other risks, and taxes report that we go through with you. But maybe you just need that 15-minute call just because you have a question or you have maybe some curiosity on what more this process could do for you. Well, stay tuned. We're going to go up to Kansas City and talk with Jonathan McCoy on when you lose a spouse, how can your taxes maybe go up? Stay tuned. We'll be right back with him right after this. Welcome back into Retire Hour, the weekly show that helps you stay up to date on the ever-changing landscape of retirement. And this is not a pleasant thought, but it's a serious conversation that we have to have often. And you guys need to pay attention if you're married out there. Jonathan McCoy, tell us about, is this a story about Terry? It sounds like that basically not a lot of great tax news for Terry.
Yeah, and the broader story is a lot of folks that we meet with are not considering those tax implications of potentially losing a spouse. What happens with the retirement funds? Not just what happens with the income streams. A loss of Social Security benefits, in some households a pension, so on and so forth. But specifically for Terry, she was already of required minimum distribution age, so she had begun taking those minimum distributions out of her own IRA at the time when her husband passed away, being about 5 years younger than her. So every time I've met with her for a review, she said, he was supposed to die after me. And unfortunately, with that circumstance, the financial advisor that Terry was working with at the time decided to, and unfortunately because that advisor was not working with a tax professional team, combine the IRA of Terry and her recently deceased husband. And by combining that portfolio all under Terry's Social Security number effectively, the IRS is now requiring her to take minimum distributions on nearly double the portfolio value at the exact same time that Terry is switching from these married filing joint tax brackets to now being a single filer. And the interesting part in Terry's circumstance was that she was actually a retired broker. She worked in our industry selling mutual funds and things like that, and had been an accountant in the past and was somewhat familiar with tax code, at least going back 10 to 15 years, so somewhat familiar with IRAs and things. But she'd always told me, she's, I retired for a reason because I don't want to have to do all of these things on my own. That's why I don't manage my own portfolio. That's why I don't do my own taxes, relying on folks like us to do that type of work. So the root issue in this circumstance was Terry was working with a financial advisor that was not fully familiar with what the tax options were or the management options were for that spousal inherited IRA at the time that her husband passed away, which would have dramatically affected what she was required to do in terms of those minimum distributions and inevitably the tax rate that she was going to pay on these retirement funds.
And all that, and then when you lose a spouse, maybe the next year, I've seen it happen to a number of people where their taxes they're paying go up. Wait, I withheld. Why do I owe? And it's terrible, terrible time to learn that. You need to be looking at that going forward. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it seems obvious to us because we're dealing with folks in these types of situations quite frequently, unfortunately, throughout the year. But I think that, the root story of it is we talk about this team approach. We talk about these regular reviews and making sure that you've got professionals staying on top of these things for yourself. But if you don't know to go and call up your CPA or call up your tax professional saying, hey, I've got some significant dramatic changes happening in my income situation, my required minimum distributions, what happens when you lose a spouse? It may not always be that your tax person is the first person that you think, or even the third, fourth, or fifth person that you think to go and talk to. And oftentimes we find that even a lot of these tax specialty services that are great at filing tax returns are not specifically attuned to how these retirement lifestyle income streams and different benefits, required minimum distributions, and things are going to be affecting people. So a regular review of tax withholdings is a big part of it also. It's similar to the process that we go through with our tax team when someone retires. They go from working to not working, Social Security kicks on. You've got to have an overhaul of that tax situation and what the planning and strategies and management and withholdings, all of that is going to change either when you retire or if you lose a spouse or if your just lifestyle and circumstances change. So this is more a story of needing to stay on top of it, but Terry was actually fortunate in her circumstance that she had a bit of a background in our industry and knew that something was just not quite right here And there were some other things downstream that getting with our tax team we were able to get on top of in terms of getting some of those IRA funds moved over to some tax-free accounts. And it was really a lifesaver and a massive savings tax-wise over the long run, being able to sit down with our tax team after we met with her for the first time.
Well, think about it out there. These retirement accounts, the IRAs, the 401ks, the majority of that money has not been taxed. And they'll probably pass this tax reform bill in one shape, form, or another. And it will probably keep taxes lower for the next couple of years. But of all the money we printed during the pandemic, I'm a firm believer that taxes will be going up in the future. Don't you agree?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the cash that's sort of sitting on the sidelines as a result of all the stimulus and financial relief after 2020, a lot of that money is still there. I mean, you and I have talked in the past about the M1 money supply, and I'm not encouraging everyone to go out there and look it up and try to understand it. But the Federal Reserve banks are putting out a lot of information on how the latent impacts of the financial buoying that had to happen for economies, not just here in the U.S., but worldwide, is going to have long-lasting impacts on things like inflation, tax rates, so on and so forth. So the way that economies function is likely changed for decades and decades to come. And I think that can be a fear-invoking thing for a lot of people. But ultimately, our reiteration is making sure that you've got a team of professionals there to assist as these changes come at us fast and furious over the next 5, 10, 15 years, especially for people that are retiring within this next 2 or 3 year window of time.
So, again, I go back to those retirement accounts, the IRAs, the 401ks. If you have those accounts out there, and the bigger they are, the bigger there's a target on their back, in my opinion, for tax hits in the future. And the time to be looking at unwinding some of those taxes. And what I mean by unwinding is someone's going to have to pay the taxes on that, whether it's you, your surviving spouse, if you're married. And again, they'll be in a higher tax bracket with less dollars, so they'll be paying more in money in taxes faster, or your kids. Someone's going to pay the money, or whoever, your niece, your nephew, whoever you leave it to, unless you leave it to a charity, someone's going to have to pay the taxes on these monies, right?
That's exactly right. And multi-generational tax planning, I'm glad that we've hit a bit. I mean, these are tough conversations to have and sort of, downtrodden conversations to think about when a loved one passes. But that multi-generational tax planning has become an incredibly important part of preserving the value of people's estates, not just for income production while you're alive, but what are the impacts going to be on your beneficiaries as well? These are things that, as financial advisors, we can continue to help grow the money, but without these other professionals, estate planning attorneys and tax professionals especially, it's very difficult to keep a plan on track these days.
So you need to call right now and schedule your 15-minute conversation with us by phone by doing 833-MAG-REPORT. That phone number again is 833, the letters MAG for Market Advisory Group Report. That stands for the Retirement Evaluation Process, Other Risks, and Taxes. We're kind of changing that up. I think I actually spoke on that. But we take you through a 3-step process where we're going to look at everything in your situation, from your investments to the fees you're paying. Are you overpaying in taxes? What's your future tax risk? What are the gaps in your estate plan? Can you improve your Medicare coverage or your healthcare coverage? All those things need to be looked at. And if you're not doing it, again, schedule that phone call today. We'll be right back with more right after this. Welcome back into Retire Hour, the weekly show that helps you stay up to date on the ever-changing landscape of retirement. You won't want to miss coming up later. We'll be talking with Gerald Eidelman about this blended family. Again, these are families that have had previous relations or kids from other relationships, and they're married. This family inheritance blew up and cost them big time, like millions of dollars. Huge mistake. And then Lauren Dietz will be talking about why you need to be looking at tax planning this time of year, halfway through the year, July-ish. But we've got Taylor Bevan here with Market Medicare Advisors. Or which hat are you wearing today? The Medicare one.
Today's Medicare.
You work in both departments. And you've got to be happy because I've got a meeting after this show and you got off TV.
You don't have to worry about recording TV.
Yeah, only one today. One and done.
You got to be happy about that.
Yep.
So this is IRMAA, and IRMAA has to do with your Medicare premiums, and this normally people don't even have any idea what's going on here until they get that letter from Social Security says they're going to start withholding more money out of your Social Security for your healthcare premiums. But this is a story about Stephanie who she's widowed, and she'd lost her husband 5-6 years ago, and they had a rental property kind of business. That's what they did. They owned a bunch of rentals, and she got the step up in cost basis, or she gets to do some of that when he passes away. But then she started to maybe not wanting to manage those rentals anymore. She'd wanted to deal with the upkeep, right?
It was a lot of work for her to try to maintain herself, and she just couldn't keep up with it, and had decided that it would be best just to sell the rental property, and just figure out what she would do with her free time after that. And I mean, with all of the information coming out there about Medicare, IRMAA is not one of them that you see very often.
No, yeah.
So most people
part IRMAA
aren't aware of that. Yeah.
There's not a part IRMAA or a plan IRMAA. It's that income related monthly adjustment amount. And so when she sold these rentals off, she still had some gains in it, where I think one year she had $400,000 in capital gains.
Right.
It was a lot.
And that bottom threshold for her, unfortunately, because her husband passed, she's now a single filer, was $106,000. So when she sold that rental property, she exceeded that threshold, unfortunately. So that year on her tax return, once it got filed, they saw that and were like, oh, hey,
you owe us more money.
She makes more money.
So you can afford higher Medicare premiums.
Uh-huh. So.
And this catches a lot of people off guard. Wouldn't you say more people figure out this is a thing when it happens to them, and they sometimes could have did things to either limit it or maybe even eliminate it altogether. We'll get to that in a second. But we meet with more people that trigger this mistake, and they're not looking at it going forward because they're not getting complete advice. Wouldn't you say?
Right. I mean, it's something that most people won't know until they get that letter in the mail saying that it's already happened.
So I will talk about in the class, is this your financial advisor's responsibility to make sure that you don't go over these limits, as they're sending you money and knowing your income? Is it your Medicare person's responsibility to tell you those income numbers every year when they're doing your annual review and annual enrollment period? Or is it your tax person guy? Is it their responsibility to say, hey, don't go over these numbers when you're getting tax planning? And the answer is D, all of the above.
Right.
But if they're not working together, whose responsibility is it? It's
yours.
The retiree's responsibility. And they're not knowing what IRMAA is or where the limits are, because the limits will change every year.
Yep.
And if you trigger it by just one penny, you're in that first tier where it's adding around $80-ish plus a month to your Medicare costs.
$74 for the Part B, and $13.70 for the Part D this year. So that's an $88 per person each month. So if you're a married couple and you hit the threshold, you guys are individual, but you count as two for purpose of IRMAA. So, I mean, $88 for two people every month. That's
on top of the $185 that the Part B is.
What the standard costs for B and D, you add $88 to that. And I mean, these change every year. The Part B, can increase each year. These thresholds can change each year. So, and they look 2 years back. So that also confuses people because they don't get that. They're like, well, I'm not making that much money. What are they talking about?
You're right. And that's what I was trying to get at when I said it catches people by surprise. And it's like, what? And you have people that are in maybe they're highly compensated, and it'll hit them for a couple of years until their income kind of drops down. Or they can do sometimes an appeal. There are some circumstances where they can waive this, but it's
not guaranteed.
It's not guaranteed.
Yeah,
that's a good way to say that.
We can definitely help clients attempt to submit a request to have the increase waived, to show that it was not a typical or a norm, or that it won't be any that high going forward. But ultimately, it is up to the discretion of whoever gets that letter to decide whether they approve it or not.
And that there's a form that goes in with it. Just like anything with the government, that it's got its own form, right? It's like SSA.
Oh, you want me to know?
Oh, sure. SSA-44. I know what it is because I teach the class. So I talk about this a lot in the class.
Look, I've got tax forms, Medicare forms, Social Security forms in my head, and they are also similar. It does not... Right now, I'm in the middle period. I just got done with tax season. I've been trying to gear into Medicare season.
But then you have to finish taxes before October 15th for anyone that's extended, right?
Right.
So you're kind of in limbo land here.
Yes.
And well, bless your heart. Well, this is something that we obviously look at when we're doing tax planning. And Jonathan was even mentioning this earlier. When you lose a spouse, those dollar amounts go down in the tax brackets, and means you can pay taxes higher, faster. But if your income, maybe if it's from real estate, or maybe if it's from oil wells, or if you just have an income source and you lose a spouse, you could be hitting some of these limits pretty quickly. And there are sometimes tax planning things you can do.
Yeah. I mean, just because you lost a spouse doesn't mean that the expenses are cut in half.
That's true.
Most often, majority of the expenses stay the same, and only small expenses like food and activities decrease. So people often need the same amount of money, and then if you hit RMD age and you have a sizable retirement account, there you go again, triggering IRMAA, because you've got this massive distribution that you're required to take, otherwise they'll penalize you. So
yeah, right now the penalty was 50%, now it's 25%, but still, the penalty and the tax on it, so you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And how do you know you're not setting yourself up for these traps down the road? Better said, how can you plan to make sure you avoid a lot of these costly mistakes in retirement? You can do it by setting up a 15-minute call with us at 833-MAG-REPORT. That phone number again is 833, the letters MAG, for Market Advisory Group Report. You can go out to the website at marketadvisorygroup.com or retirehour.com. We'll stay tuned. We'll be right back with Gerald Eidelman, again, talking about this story in the news. You won't want to miss it. We'll be right back. Welcome back into Retire Hour. This is a story that it's been in the news several places, and I saw it, and Gerald saw it as well, and we're like, we should talk about that on the radio. But if you're out there listening to this, do you know your estate plan is set exactly like you need it? Because check out this story. This is like a $800,000 plus mistake. It's a $2 million oversight. These are not little numbers.
No.
And it all was because of previous marriages, and we call those blended families, where you have a previous relationship or married to someone and you either lose them to death or divorce. I know sometimes people have a little bit more of a preference than one or the other on those sometimes.
Right.
Anyways, but if you don't have the proper plan in place, and I think you said if you don't have also the team to execute that plan for you, this is where things go pretty south. So this is someone who'd been married before and they got divorced and they remarried, right?
Right. This is it just went into filing court in May 19th of this year in tax court and already decided. So it was a pretty swift decision. Clearly, as far as the court was concerned, there was no question to it. The name of the case is State of Griffin versus Commissioner. And basically, the spouse, the deceased spouse, was the husband, and he was a wealthy man. He was divorced and had children from that prior marriage. And he remarried. At the time of his death, he just remarried for 1 year to this lady, Maria, I believe was her name. And his intent was to provide for Maria without disinheriting his children. That's a big issue with blended families.
Sure. So if you pass away, you want to make sure you at least can leave something to your kids, but you still have to help the wife, so the surviving spouse, maintain their lifestyle.
Exactly. Because if you just leave the money to the surviving spouse, trusting them to wind up providing for your children, there could be, when people reach a certain age, dementia, other things can be malfeasance, and they can change all your plans that you set up, and they might wind up disinheriting your children.
What if they get married again?
That's right.
What if they remarry after you pass away? You don't want, again, those assets. You want them to stay in your family. You want them to take care of your family. But that's not what happened in this situation.
No. I mean, she was still going to get money, but she wasn't getting the state tax exemption that they were expecting. What happens is that, obviously, we don't know the actual numbers, but he was over the state tax exemption, which is $13 million. So we assume his estate is $15 million. He was intended to take a $2 million slice to remove it from the $15 million and pass it to his wife. Now, because he's passing it to his wife, the wife, you can pass any amount of money to your spouse, and it's not includable in your estate. So there wouldn't have been any state tax at the time that this thing was set up. So he was avoiding state tax at the beginning. Eventually, the deceased spouse will have to include it in their estate, and they would have to pay taxes then. But here's an interesting part of this whole thing, is that depending on what property you put into these Q-tips, the property gets stepped up in basis when the surviving spouse dies. So if you put income-producing property like rental properties or whatever, all the gain from the time you died till the time the surviving spouse died is wiped away, and your children get the full benefit of the assets.
And that's not what happened here.
No. What happened is that there's three requirements for a Q-tip to work. One is that the trust has to pay all income or interest income to the spouse, the surviving spouse.
Makes sense.
Yeah, the second part is surviving spouse can demand the trustee invest the money in income-producing property. So, if you put land on there and it's just sitting there and doesn't produce any income, the spouse can say, no, you got to sell it and invest it in the market or what have you. And the part that we missed here, there must be an election to treat these funds as a Q-tip trust with the last return of the decedent.
So that would be, whose responsibility would that be to make sure, because you're dead? I mean, you've set this trust up. Who's going to make sure that happens?
Well, that's a wonderful question, because here's where we have several intersections. I mean, lawyers have a role to play, but accountants are also very important here, because it's not simply just me telling you what the law is, but we had to also take account of the money, all of these things that a lawyer may or may not be able to do. And that's the wonderful things that we have a team here. And the best part is that, once we settle everything, once we make the right elections, we can turn around to the financial advisors and have the money invested in, properly income-producing property.
Who knew it would be easier working as a team?
I know, it's not funny.
But it takes all the burden off of the individual's shoulders, because if not, they're the one having to play traffic cop between an accountant, maybe a CPA or an attorney, and maybe even the financial advisor, and that's a mess.
Yeah, and this also highlights the importance of, and in this case, it's not clear from the article, but I believe that it was a third-party trustee. But if there wasn't, this is a really good opportunity to consider having a professional third-party trustee, lawyers, accountants, trust companies who know the ins and outs of these trusts and can give you good advice, timely advice. You need a team when you set things up, and you need a team after the person dies and you had to execute the plan.
Well, that's what we do day in, day out. And this is a crazy story when I saw it in the news. I'm glad you talked about it. But ask yourself this: is your estate plan set up the right way? You guys will talk about it all the time. If you've not taken a look at your estate plan, it's older than 5 years, come in. They'll do a complimentary review with you. but you want to make sure you're keeping that estate plan up to date, because it's not a set it and forget it.
That's right.
So many things happen and so many things change. And if you're not confident in your plan, or maybe you have a little anxiety or you're worried about it, reach out and schedule a 15-minute chat with us by phone at 833-MAG-REPORT. That phone number again is 833, the letters MAG, report. Or you can go to the website at marketadvisorygroup.com or retirehour.com. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Lauren Dietz talking about why you need to look at tax planning halfway through the year. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back into Retire Hour, the weekly show that helps you stay up to date on the ever-changing landscape of retirement. Lauren and I were talking funnies here at the commercial break. Sorry. Lauren Dietz with Market Tax Services. Down to serious stuff. Gosh darn it. We need to be talking about tax planning. Why would you look at tax planning mid-year?
So we like to look at tax planning mid-year, especially for people that maybe have done some different changes to, or need to do changes to their withholdings. Say they got a different job, or they've turned on a new stream or multiple streams of income. It's nice to look at that like over the summer, because that'll give them time to actually make those changes in those withholdings and then be able to see those changes, because it's going to take a few months, especially for like Social Security. They're not going to, it's not like you fax something in and then tomorrow they're like, okay, we'll fix that. It's the government.
I remember when Joshua was still new around here, I would have him check my withholdings to make sure I was sitting in enough on my paycheck and things. And as the income could fluctuate, what we see with the people we help is typically it's those retirees when either they still have a spouse working and maybe one of them started Social Security, or maybe one of them took some money out of the retirement account or a pension, whatever the income stream is. But as those two retire, their tax withholdings and their income streams are all going to get a little wonky.
Yeah, and sometimes we have to take a look at it a couple of different times throughout the year. And if we see that, they're going to be quite a bit short in taxes, second quarter taxes are due on June 15th.
They are.
For estimated payments. So sometimes we'll go ahead and suggest that they make one of those, and then we can also take a look and plan on, well, do they need to make a third quarter in September?
And so there is an executive order out there that Joshua told me about, or an EO, as oftentimes referred to. The government doesn't want to take those paper vouchers anymore. So how do you, because what was funny is the software didn't know the executive order was going to come out. And so the software spit out 4 vouchers: first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. But those third and fourth quarter vouchers, are they valid anymore?
Right. They're they kind of did this real wonky, because it's going to cause some problems for some people, because this is kind of like a mid-year thing. But yeah, they're going to have to start making all those payments online. The IRS is no longer going to accept paper checks or issue paper checks. So I mean, there's a lot of people that maybe they get their refunds deposited, but they're like, I don't want to, do this electronically, or
they're just used to paying it by paper check.
Yeah, they're just used to it.
Maybe that's the habit. But I actually was teaching a tax class the week before. No kidding, had another CPA in the audience, and I was a little flattered. He came to my tax class.
Oh, that is so sweet.
But he had no idea the executive order had come out.
I'm sure glad he went to your tax class.
I'm certainly glad he went to the tax class, but it's these kinds of things that we talk about on the radio each week. We'll talk about in our classes. It's hard to stay up with all these regulations and tax changes and blah, 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 blah. Normally people figure out they've hurt themselves after they get a high tax bill, or after they owe more on money that they didn't realize. And that's what we're trying to avoid by doing these planning appointments.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really helpful. And sometimes it doesn't take just one planning appointment. I mean, we'll do a mid-year planning over the summer, and then we'll also meet with them in the fourth quarter, where we can discuss, is there any other options that they have as far as doing something beyond just making an estimated payment? Are there any tax advantages to moving some money around?
Absolutely.
We got to see them sometimes multiple times a year.
And you guys do that with us in the conference room. The financial advisors, we get our clients in there and we go through tax planning in the fourth quarter before December 31st rolls around.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have those things done before the end of the year, you're not getting tax advice. You're getting tax preparation.
Basically, yeah.
And as Joshua says, you're recording history. You can't really do a lot to change history, but before December 31st rolls around, you have the destiny, you have the power of your destiny in your hands.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
We got a new commercial right there for you.
Oh my gosh.
So if you don't know that you're getting tax advice, or maybe even, I'll go a step further, as they're going to pass this tax bill in some shape, form, or another, if you don't know how to maximize these tax savings over the next 3-4 years, reach out and give us a call, 833-MAG-REPORT. That phone number again is 833, the letters MAG for Market Advisory Group Report. That's our process we take people through, but oftentimes I've had several conversations with people, just again, these 15-minute chats, getting some answers to their quick questions, and sometimes telling them, you'd really benefit from going through our whole process. And that first appointment, we get to know you even a little bit more. The second appointment, we do our analysis, and the third appointment, we present solutions to it. But oftentimes, like I said, so many people benefit from just scheduling that 15-minute call with us just to have a conversation and get the ball rolling and see if you could really benefit from this process. Well, that's all the time we have this week for Retire Hour. We appreciate you tuning in. Go check out, again, that new website, retirementhelp.com, and also our YouTube page. We'll see you next week.
Investment advisory services are duly offered through Foundations Investment Advisors LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor, and Market Investment Group LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. The investment advisor representatives of Market are also affiliated with and registered through Foundations Investment Advisors LLC, and may provide services on behalf of both firms to client or prospective clients where properly licensed or exempt. This show is presented by Market Investment Group LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor that only conducts business in jurisdictions where it is properly registered or is excluded or exempted from registration requirements. Registration as an investment advisor is not an endorsement of the firm by securities regulators and does not mean that the advisor has achieved a specific level of skill or ability. The firm is not engaged in the practice of law or accounting. The information presented is believed to be current. It should not be viewed as personalized investment advice. All expressions of opinion reflect the judgment of the presenter on the date of the show's publication and are subject to change. The information presented is not an offer to buy or sell or a solicitation of any offer to buy or sell any of the securities discussed. You should consult with a professional advisor before implementing any of the strategies discussed. Any legal or tax information provided in this show is general in nature. Always consult an attorney or tax professional regarding your specific legal or tax situation. Annuity and life insurance guarantees are subject to the claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company. If you withdraw money from or surrender your contract within a certain time after investing, the insurance company may assess a surrender charge. Withdrawals may be subject to tax penalties and income taxes. Persons selling annuities and other insurance products receive compensation for these transactions. These commissions are separate and distinct from fees charged for advisory services. Insurance products also contain additional fees and expenses. Social Security rules and regulations are subject to change at any time. Always consult with your local Social Security office before acting upon any information provided herein. A Roth conversion may not be suitable for your situation. The primary goal in converting retirement assets into a Roth IRA is to reduce the future tax liability on the distributions you take in retirement or on the distributions of your beneficiaries. The information provided is to help you determine whether or not a Roth IRA conversion may be appropriate for your particular circumstances. Please review your retirement savings, tax, and legacy planning strategies with your legal/tax advisor to be sure a Roth IRA conversion fits into your planning strategies. This is not endorsed by the U.S. government or associated with any federal Medicare program. We do not offer every plan available in your area. Any information we provide is limited to those plans we do offer in your area. Please contact Medicare.gov or 1-800-MEDICARE to get information on all your options. All client or prospective client names have been changed to protect the identities of the individuals discussed. All rights reserved.